Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Here we go. Fine. I couldn't get my mute to come off. Let me start by thanking Peter for his excellent presentation. Peter and I have worked some time together, and I think he's covered all the key issues that have to go with energy conservation, water conservation. My role at Tradewinds today is to present somewhat of a case study in water conservation. I'm excited to be able to do that today. Make sure I get this slide here. 20% of the linen reuse in water savings will account for about 20% through their linen reuse program, and the speakers that will follow me will address that in much more detail than I'll take in this one here. With the potential for an additional 10% in what is often referred to as green sheeting. Specifically how frequently you change the sheets in the bed, and how closely you follow your own internal policies to do that. Here at Tradewinds, we use beige sheeting, going by several colors. Several manufacturers have it. It is becoming somewhat more difficult to find beige sheets on the market or being able to get them with some kind of consistency. And there is a move to go back to white linen. So here at Tradewinds, we are also making that move. So I will address some of the issues that presents as I move forward here. Today, however, I want to focus an awful lot on the 5% savings that a laundry manager and the wash team really have control over in respect to the contract arrangement they have with those folks that provide chemicals to them and who may service their equipment, whether it's an internal engineer or an outside agent that comes in and does that for you, what kind of expectations you need there, to talk about some controls with the chemicals, to address things like how do you take care of stained linen, what do you do, and then lastly some service expectations, trying to draw into that some of my own experiences at home with my own bride. And we have a very large family, so I feel real qualified to talk about what Mama does at home, because we apply many of those principles in our hotel laundries, and any of them also in the larger industrial laundries. And then talk about target or targeted formulas, something that will really help us move forward on what we do. There was some discussion earlier, I think Peter mentioned, about having an outside person come in to look at the laundry. And I think that's really important. But I want to preface that statement by saying that most of your outside consultants will come in and they'll focus on what it costs per pound for you to produce the product that you put in your guest rooms. And then they'll compare that to what it will cost to go to an outside professional laundry to do it for you. They will address such things as new equipment and latest types of equipment. And all that's great information because it keeps you up to speed with what's out there. All too often we get equipment into our facilities that have been there forever. It's what we inherit. At Tradewinds, when I came on about 9 years ago, I had several pieces of equipment that were 20 to 30 years old. I have a 1,000-pound washer, and I've got all different sizes. And over the last 8 years, we've tried to set up some form of consistent, standardized piece of equipment for training purposes. And of course, the last thing that's most dreaded when that happens is what we always refer to as the dreaded staff change. All very important to us. Let me address wash formulas and target formulas a little bit here. And particularly what I find as I visit other laundries here on the beach, I'm often asked to visit with them. Most folks really don't have a good overview of what a wash formula is. They rely heavily on someone to come in and do that. So let me provide some of the terms you should hear and just a brief explanation of what those are and what to expect. And you'll see on the slide some of the things are in a wash formula. And you'll discover as I move forward that not all of these are required on every wash formula. Some may be, some may not be. And in fact, at Tradewinds, on the pre-rinse concept, we've asked ourselves, just because mothers at home pre-rinse the jeans in the washer, is that necessary for us? But a pre-rinse is just that, an opportunity for us to put a catalyst or some kind of chemical in in a washer and let the linen sit there, soak up some water, maybe get rid of some gross debridement. In hotels, sometimes you have blood, a lot of emesis. You have sand here in the beach, lots of it. It may have, when a sweaty night, stuck to the sheets. And the goal is to just get the linen wet and kind of float that stuff off and to float it away in a rinse. Then you actually have the wash cycle where you put chemicals in. The wash cycle might consist of your detergent, chlorine bleach, or we're going to talk a little bit about non-chlorine bleach. There are several types of those out there. A detergent, linear alcohol is definitely the preferred. I'm surprised that they even have the old tallow base we saw years and years ago still out there, but if you look hard you can find it. And then a certain number of rinses. I think the recommendation is 3. And then lastly, what we call a finishing. This is where you might add a softener, make your product a little bit more fluffy, and you might put some chemicals to make sure that the product comes out so when your guests line it, they don't react to the alkali you may have put on earlier as a stain deterrent. All these things are very important to you. Now, with that in mind, I want to advance also to discuss more detail, a little bit about what we mean in targeted formulas. At Tradewinds, we have 14 separate formulas, anything from a very light soil to something that just needs a little bit of attention to something that has heavy, heavy soil. We address things daily, such as bed lice. We have concerns about scabies. We have all those things that we as hoteliers are concerned about and we have to address. So we put 14 different formulas together to address each of those. Most important to us is we've discovered that whether we use cold or hot water is equally important. And wherever we can, if we don't have to heat it, there's some inherent savings that Peter addressed. But to us, it may not be necessary to have hot water for some items. Our beach towels, for example, serve as a perfect example. Your pool towels is a perfect example. You really don't need to put a lot of effort into those. You don't have to heat them and treat them as if they're heavy soiled. You just need to turn them very quickly and get them back out into service. We do some things here to support that many hotels might consider. We actually sort our linen on the floor, and we do that by dedicating specific times during the hour that linen can be put down our linen chutes. Now, I'm assuming you have linen chutes, but there are many other methods that can do that. And this allows us in the laundry to bring a specific product back to us and then to evaluate it and see what we need to do with it, what kind of formula we might want to use, what machine we'll put it in. So our linen comes back to us and we become more focused not on separating linen, but more focused on getting it into the right machine with the right formula, the right water temperature, and then moving it on through the system. Sometimes you can even go so far as to ask yourself, do you have to wash this product now? There's a great advantage Peter mentioned by waiting until later in the day when the price of your utilities starts going down. And so at Tradewinds, where we have items that have heavy staining, these are sheets that perhaps we've identified that have gone to the ironer and there's a problem there. We hold them to the end of the day and we put them in a machine at the end of the day and we enhance the formula a little bit, maybe change the chemical, change the time it runs. But we do it in the day, at the end of the day. In fact, we're so focused on it that we have our machines set on timers and our compressors that drive our compressed air-driven machines, and we run them after we've gone home for the day. They shut off automatically, which is a wonderful thing because we don't have to stand around using the machines, watching the machines turn when we're not there. I personally like the labor savings component there, and I'm sure you would also. You can reduce some of these formula and combine some of the formula steps. You can increase the exposure to a chemical, or you can decrease it. I mentioned the pool towel, for example. We have in our rooms kitchen sets. All of our rooms have small kitchenettes. And those kitchen sets come back to us, and we wash them all together at the same time at the end of every evening. And the formula requires a little bit more effort, a little bit more chemical, and we'll do those. On the same token, we have to ask ourselves what we can do in increasing and decreasing our spin time. Peter mentioned softness. Let me embellish on that a little bit. There's a lot of things that contribute to softness, including the chemical. Not using too much chemical is a great help. Not over drying your linen is the perfect choice for helping increase your softness. and of course you have softener that you can put in your system. But if I take a product and I spin it a little bit longer in my wash formula, just a little bit longer, or I have a machine that's designed to give a little bit more centripetal force, the end result to me is that I have less drying time requirement, and I save money there also. Cold water rinses I talked on a little bit, and I think since Peter and I met, he'd probably be surprised if I announced that now we have a complete soft water system at Tradewinds, because we found in doing so the chemical cost savings has been kind of astronomical for us. We've been very impressed with it, and a much better product. So would unequivocally say, please, please do not, please work very hard to getting a soft water system. On our next slide, I want to address a few things in terms of service. Now, when I talked to Sagante earlier, I said this is an area that I'd really like to go, because here at Tradewinds, for the first time in many, many years, they brought in a professional laundry manager. In the past, they promoted internally, and many of the problems they experienced continued here. You need to be fully aware of what to expect when you have service provided you from a new vendor. I'm sure all of you have experienced that situation where a vendor comes in and he says he can give you a better cost per pound or a better price for your chemicals and give you better service, but what should you expect? And so let me address that, because that is key information to you in the business. First and foremost, change your vendors regularly. Let me emphasize this this way. Changing the vendors allows you to use different chemicals. It allows a comfort level not to be established that promotes things not happening that should happen. You should expect some kind of titration on a regular basis. That's where your service vendor will come out and physically take the water and make sure that you have the right amounts of chemical for the specific programs you're running. When that doesn't happen, you're wasting chemical, and you only need a certain amount. One of the things I learned from my wife is that a cap full of bleach does just as well in water as a third of a cup or a half a cup of bleach, and it takes just as long, and the rest is just wasteful. So titration is that element where your service agent verifies on a regular basis that the chemical you have is where it needs to be, and responsiveness. I did some figures up earlier just to give an emphasis here. We have an expectation of our wash staff, and using a 120-pound washer and an estimated 2 gallons per pound, you're going to go through about 3,000 gallons of water pretty quickly. If you have a problem with your titration, you can get a quick feel for how much water you're pumping down the drain that's not meeting your goals objectives. Maybe it doesn't have enough chemical or enough detergent or enough softener, and the end result is very negative. Responsiveness is critical to you. I also want to talk about education. The education component is that you should expect your chemical vendor to come in and take your wash staff and give them a good chemical education experience. Teach them what those chemicals do. Be involved in the development of the formulas that you use every day, so that when you wash your linen, they understand fully. It's amazing when I walk on the washroom floor daily that my washman, who's been with me about 8 years old, about 8 years, since he's about 8, seems like it, he can tell me what formulas to put on, and if he has just a little bit of linen, he can say, well, you know, I can put it in this formula and get the same results with less chemical. As a manager, that's what I'm looking at, but more importantly, it preserves the linen that I have. It also gives you a chance to make sure your chemical delivery systems are current and up to date, to hold your service reps accountable, to let them know on a regular basis what you expect from them, how they're performing. It's important that you define your engineering department's responsibilities with a comparison to what you expect your service representative to provide you. Consider your safety record. We touched on safety a little bit. At Tradewinds, I absolutely forbid any of my washmen to handle the chemicals. I want the service rep to do this. He knows how to treat them correctly. He knows all the safety precautions, and he knows how to move the barrels if we use barrels, and how to take care of everything for me. One of my folks who really doesn't understand what an alkali might do might make a mistake and spill it and hurt himself. And now I have lost not only an employee, I have an injury I need to care for, and I may have downtime in the washroom, and I really don't want either. I want to have a safe area. I mentioned titrate, make sure the chemical levels are the same. Use current formulas, change as often as you need to, address your needs, make sure they're current. Water level is important too. You know, I always grew up with the understanding that you had to look at a wash machine, and if you didn't see water in the glass, the washer must not be working. It took a few years to gather the concept together to realize it wasn't how much water I saw. It was what was absolutely happening to the linen that was in there to make sure that things are accurate and working very well. We touched a little bit on responsiveness. Give you some rough numbers here. A 135-pound washer, you should expect about 2 gallons per pound of linen in there of water use. If you have a slow response, you really don't know what's happening. Response is critical to you, and formula development. At Tradewinds, we take all the linen that we have that is not suitable for room use anymore, and we cut it up and make rags out of it. The rags are then taken annually and put on the floors for the housekeepers, the engineering department, several other areas to use those. They come back nightly at different times. We consolidate them into one load, and on that load we use pretty heavy chemicals. We're going to put alkali in there. If it's got a lot of grease, frankly, we're just going to throw it away and consider it a lost cause. After all, it was a rag to start with. Put those together. We're not going to put water softener. I haven't figured out why an engineer would want softener on his rag yet. So we're going to look at those kinds of things and develop a formula specific to rags and process them so we can turn them on very quickly. That formula, by the way, is almost an hour and a half long. So I don't need a lot of chemical. I just need to get them cleaned and back into service. And eventually we know that they're going to expire and we're going to rag them out a little further to the trash can. The annual staff MSDS training is critical. Your vendor should provide you current MSDS forms required by your fire department and your security department, as well as the chemical training. The pH validation is critical. There are several ways to do that. He can train your folks how to take a vial of a chemical to check and see what the concentration is of a chemical in your linen. A little drop will do you, and it'll tell you. He'll show you how to do that. And knowledge of new products and systems. There's a plethora of new products out there, and new equipment, and new chemicals. Although I prefer to change as often as I can, those are the things that I look for to make the laundry very successful. In closing, I want to point out here that in the laundry, education is critical to everything we do. Our laundry staff nightly make sure the boiler's off several hours before we no longer need hot water. We found that the temperature residual from the boiler will heat the water for several hours, so we don't bother to keep it on. And as I mentioned earlier, wherever possible, we try to use a cold wash formula. Works very well, doesn't take colors away, and coordinates the product very nicely for us. And Peter also mentioned something that's very important, although I think Peter was probably considering the effect on cost and in terms of energy conservation. Let me add an additional twist to it, and that is that equipment that is off not only protects the equipment from power surge, it doesn't allow equipment to operate, if you will, in your panel boards that you can't see, and it makes your panels and your equipment last much longer. So turning the equipment off is critical, not just as an energy-saving function, but also as equipment preservation. At this point, let me conclude by saying that Tradewinds, we process about 8 million pounds a year using 14 separate formulas and products, from as heavy stain as a rag to as light a stain as a beach towel. We do this on a single shift and do it every day, 365 days a year. At this time, I'll turn the form over to questions.